Let's talk about soil fertility and fertilizers. How much fertilizer do I need? Too little, forage yield will be low. Still have the same cost. Too much, you can increase costs beyond what you want to. Plants are only going to use so much. And there could be negative effects of excess fertilizer. One being your pocketbook as well as health effects. Nitrates can move into springs and wells. You don't want that. I've actually seen that happen on farms. It's usually associated with confined feeding facilities rather than just application of mineral fertilizer. Get phosphorus runoff into your pond, or it could be the Potomac River. Okay. But any of these things can be poor for the family or livestock health. Algae blooms in ponds, and it's the wrong type of algae. It can kill cows and high production costs. So we don't want to over-fertilize. So how much fertilizer do I need? Depends on your crop, your soil type, soil health, weather, soil fertility. So it all depends, right? That's a classic extension answer. Let's sort it out. Let's first of all look at soil fertility. Okay? This is something we can measure through soil sampling and soil test analysis. The big key in taking a soil sample is separate the land into different management units. I would encourage you to find out what is your soil type. And we talked about EPDs for cattle. If you know your soil type, we actually have a table that we can provide for you that will show you the yield potential for different crops on those soil types in West Virginia. So down here, this is going to be one soil type. I don't know what it is. I know it's a soil type, okay? And I know that this soil is going to be different than that soil, just because it lays on the landscape differently. And then I'm going to have a different soil up here. So separate your samples out into your management units, and smaller management units are better. Use the proper tools. Invest in a soil probe. This makes taking a soil sample so much easier. How many of you own a tractor? Okay, how much? You don't have to tell me what the tractor costs, but it costs a bunch, right? That tool is less than $100. How much does a ton of fertilizer cost? Somebody know the price this year?
2 to 4.
Okay, 2 to 4. Depends on what you're buying, right? You want to put the right fertilizer out in the right place, right? This is a cheap tool for doing that. Now, fortunately, my wife's not here. I steal the cup from my wife, use it, and if I wash it and get it back, she usually doesn't catch it. Looking at some of the women here, I don't know what they have to put up with. I did invest in my own stainless steel utility spoon. Take the sample, take your cores with the core sampler, put them in the bucket, use this to crush them up a little bit, shake it around. That's going to bring your organic matter and a lot of your roots up to the top. Use this to scoop off roots and rocks and stuff like that. You'll end up with a near pure soil sample in the bottom of that bucket. It's pretty easy to do if you have the right tools. And don't get caught and scolded. Okay? Okay, how deep do we take it? If it's permanent pasture or permanent hay meadow, we recommend top 2 inches. If it's a hay field or crops in rotation, 6 inches. Any till crop, 6 inches, or 8, 6 to 8. If it's no-till, corn land, we recommend the top 1 inch, and then from 2 to 6. Another way you could do it, which will give you good information, pull a full 6-inch sample, break off the top inch for pH, and then just use that the rest of that sample for everything else. So, what we're going to talk about is crop response to fertility. And don't ignore the number. Once upon a time, these numbers applied to West Virginia. They don't today, and they won't within a few months, because we're changing the system. Dr. Pena may have mentioned that, but we're going to be changing our extraction system. So the number doesn't matter. What matters is that there is a point here where soil fertility is in the high range. Okay? And what the number down on this axis is depends on how you extract that soil in the lab. You're going to get different numbers. But our labs will pretty much agree with each other in terms of what is the high testing phosphorus. Once we get into that high range, you're not going to get a response to fertilizer. Okay? If you're down in the low range, you're going to have a big response to phosphorus fertilizer. So if we're down in the low range, our yield is held about half of its potential just because the plant doesn't have enough phosphorus to run the system. We know that sunlight is needed to grow plants, right? The plant needs phosphorus to catch that energy and metabolize that energy. The energy cycle is based around, once you've done photosynthesis, then the rest of the energy cycle is run around phosphorus. That's why it's so important. So, soils that test high in phosphorus, no phosphorus fertilizer is needed to maintain production, but underlined for short periods of time. What happens if I have a high soil testing field and I've never put phosphorus on it and I take A off of it? Come on, tell me. It's gone. It's gone. The hay is going to suck that phosphorus off, and sooner or later it's going to be low testing phosphorus if I don't put anything on. So that's why I say you don't need it for short periods of time. No, the crop removing, well, I guess the answer was right there too. It reduces yield. So the crops removing, a hay crop's removing about 10 to 12 pounds of phosphorus, P2O5, per ton of forage that comes off. We'll talk more about that. K, potassium, same thing applies. It's a little different, but the same principle applies. If you're in the high range, you don't need to add potassium fertilizer. If you're down in the low range, it can really be detrimental. Now, why is there so much spread? It all depends on the clay content of the site, not only the percent clay, but what type of clay do you have in that soil. We don't analyze for that, okay? That takes an electron microscope. And I didn't even take that class, so I'm laughing, Bob, because I see you laugh. That was the one agronomy class I didn't take, was clay mineralogy. But I do know the importance of it. And so, just like phosphorus, if you're in the high range, you can get away for a short period of time without applying potassium. But look here. Forage crops remove 40 to 60 pounds of K2O per ton of hay. They're a big user. Now, phosphorus is needed to run the energy cycle. Potassium is needed by the plant to translocate those sugars to storage organs. Potassium is also required to control water movement in and out of the plant. So that's, if you don't have adequate potassium, your plant's just not going to function right. So let's jump over and talk about fertilization effects. So this is on a soil testing low in phosphorus. And now this is an important number. This is phosphorus applied as a ratio of phosphorus removed by your crop. Okay? So on a low testing soil, we need up to 4 times removal rate to get maximum yield. That's a lot of phosphorus. Okay? But what's happening, the crop's taking up its quarter, it's 25%. The soil is fixing the other 75%. And that other 75% that's being fixed, now it's going to be available long term if my pH is right, but it's building the soil test value. And this type of fixation with phosphorus, we call it phosphorus absorption. You don't have to learn that big fancy word, but if you ever hear it, that's what it's talking about. So it's not all bad. We are building soil tests, but so high rates of fertilizer are needed for these low testing soils. Phosphorus is held. The 4 times removal rate is needed to get maximum yield. Now, I do computer modeling as well as other things. Computers help us synthesize data to get a better feeling for what's going on. So based on my little computer model and the data out of West Virginia that we have, probably what you don't go with that 4 times removal rate, go with 2 times. Now within about 3 to 4 years, if you go with 2 times removal rate, you will have built up the soil test phosphorus adequately where you'll be getting maximum yield. And your soil test phosphorus will be in the, probably in the high range. Okay? So the research number says up to 4 times. The computer model says it's probably most practical to be using 2 times removal rate. Realizing in the first year or 2 you may not get maximum yield, but out by 3 to 5 years we'll be getting maximum yield and have a high soil test phosphorus. So that's an idea. The other big thing, recycle manure. Okay? I know none of you feed hay in the woods, right? Good. If you feed hay in the woods, you just threw away your fertilizer. Hay should be fed in a barn with bedding or fed back out on your hay meadows if you want to maintain fertility. The other thing is, if I'm buying this fertilizer, I don't want to have to keep buying it every year. I might buy it for 3 to 5 years to build up fertility, but if I recycle manure and urine, I can maintain fertility. Okay, we're going to jump over to potassium for a minute. Same principle, well, it's a little different for potassium. Even on a low testing soil, you only need to apply at removal rate, because potassium in our soils, you're not in California, folks, okay? This does not apply in California. In West Virginia soils, our clays hold potassium, but it's held in a readily available form back to the plant in a seasonal cycle. Forgetting about droughts. Okay, it's a different issue. So during wet weather, as long as I apply what the crop needs, that's adequate. Now you're not going to build soil fertility at that rate, are you? We're just applying what the crop needs. So even on a low testing soil, fertilize with potassium at removal rate if you want maximum yield. They soil hold K in the available form. It's different than phosphorus. But we still want to recycle manure and urine to build fertility. So you can, if I have a hay field, I can maximize yield just by, and I'm making 4 tons yield or whatever it is. If I apply at removal rate, I'll get maximum yield, but I'm not building fertility. But if I get that manure and urine back out on the land, now I can build fertility. Okay? Big important part, if you're barn feeding, you've got to have good bedding to catch the urine. Okay, I want you to remember this. Phosphorus is in poop. Okay? That's in the manure. The potassium's in the pea. Okay? So if you want to save the urine, you've got to save the I mean, if you want to save the potassium, you've got to save the urine, because that's where it's at. Okay, now we're going to jump up to medium and high testing soils. As long as I've got into that high range, now all I have to do is apply removal rate. And I can maintain yield at the maximum. Same with potassium. If I apply removal rate, I can maintain yield. Now, I will show you this. If you apply half removal rate on a high testing potassium soil, you still will get, for a period of time, high yields because the clay is holding potassium in reserve. And with potassium, well, here's the numbers you can remember. Phosphorus, it's roughly 2 units of phosphorus to 1 unit of soil test in our old soil test system. Potassium, it's about 12 units of potassium for 1 unit of soil test. So those numbers are just showing you there's a lot more reserve potassium once you build it up than there is phosphorus. On the other hand, if you tear it down, you've got to put a whole lot more back to build it back up long term. So, soils testing high in P or K, we want to recycle manure and urine to maintain fertility. And once you've built into that high range, this is the main way you can maintain fertility on a livestock farm. Okay? And that's the really cool thing about it. That this is why livestock are sustainable systems. Use legumes to make your nitrogen, recycle your manure and urine for your phosphorus and potassium, and the sunlight makes the energy. You're not missing a whole lot more. Okay? So organic systems that don't have livestock are not sustainable. If you have an organic grain or vegetable farm without livestock, those are not self-contained sustainable systems. I'm just stating the facts. People may not like it, but those are the ecological facts. So, barn feeding, we need bedding. Then we fertilize with purchased fertilizers at crop removal rate on that part of the farm where I can't get manure back out on it. So if you have some mainland that we don't graze, and we can't feed hay out on it, then you're going to have to take care of that with purchased fertilizer. And if it's rented land, you have the option of not renting it anymore. That's what I chose to do. I would not consider renting land that doesn't have water or fence. Now, again, that's just my opinion. It doesn't mean that you should farm that way. But I don't have enough value in that type of land. Now, if you give it to me for free, and I've had that, give it to me for free to cut the hay once a year just to keep it clean, that's different economics at that point. And I have done that. Now, just to show you, forage quality determines nutrient removal. This is based on over 2,000 samples, all West Virginia samples, okay? So as crude protein goes up, nitrogen goes up, because how do we measure crude protein? We just measure nitrogen and multiply it by 6.25. So that's a direct, that's one-to-one relationship there. Now there's more variability here on phosphorus and potassium, but notice as I go from 8% crude protein, that's 11, this is pounds of P2O5 per ton of hay dry matter, 11. If I went up to really high quality baleage, and let's just cut it here at 18% crude protein, if you do a good job with baleage, that's a doable protein level. That hay, on a dry matter basis, needs 16 pounds of P2O5 per ton. K2O's the same. Now this 8 to 10, that's kind of classic West Virginia dry beef cow hay. So that's 40 pounds of P2O5. But if I get up here in the dairy quality hay, Now I'm, okay, dairy hay, we're in that 60 pounds of K2O per ton. So, and then if you want a copy of this PowerPoint, just send me an email and I'll share it with you. You pay my salary if you're from West Virginia, okay? So you're my boss. I'll give you what you need here. So on soils testing medium, I recommend apply at the removal rate to maintain yield, but then let's build fertility into the high rate using our manure and urine, okay, for the cow. And then in the high testing soils, as long as you're doing a good enough job recycling, you don't need to buy much, if any, fertilizer. Not there. Okay. On my farm, this is what I do, and yeah, I've been doing it this way for probably 15, 20, closer to 20 years than 15. And in that time, I have only had to buy fertilizer for those sites that were down in the medium range. For sites that were even at the low end of high range, I've maintained fertility just by feeding out on the hay meadows. And in the 25 years, I've bought less than 10 tons of fertilizer, and that includes urea fertilizer when I used to buy that. So it does work. That's a testimonial I can give you. So fertilizer needs depends on yield. Keep in mind what's the quality. It's somewhere 10 to 16 pounds. P205, 40 to 60, depending on quality. If we're just making classic beef cow hay, we're down on this lower end. If you're talking to folks up in Pennsylvania that are pushing dairy, quality hay, they're going to be up on this end. We're both right. It just depends on the quality of the hay that you're dealing with. And here's how to do the math. I've got some hay land that this is an example of hay land where I can't get manure to it. Getting 2 tons of hay off first cut, 1 ton of hay off second cut, total of 3 tons. I'm going to assume just an average quality. So 3 tons times 12 is 36 pounds of P2O5. 3 times 45 is 135 pounds. Now, if I were using triple 19, how much do I use? Not the right ratio, is it? So you get a blend fertilizer. That's one way to do it. And I've left nitrogen out of here, haven't I? And that's because I'm assuming I'm going to run it with clovers. But we'll get to that. So pastures also need proper fertilization. The nice thing about pasture, it's sad that so many people don't fertilize pasture. That's where you're going to get the most return for the longest period of time per unit of input, because you get recycling. And that, in some ways, you can almost argue, well, okay, let's argue it this way. Go ahead and, if you have low fertility on your pasture, go ahead and put it on the hay field, then feed the hay out on pasture land until you build up the fertility on the pasture land. That's one way to get double value out of that hay investment. But sooner or later, what did I just do wrong? Or I didn't do. I took it off the hay land, so I've got to be putting it back on the hay land from purchased fertilizer. Thank you. So livestock return it. P is in the poop and K is in the P. Now it's not always distributed uniformly. So you need to strategically sample and fertilize out on your pastures. The cattle are going to drop most of the manure and urine where they bed, which is going to be near shade. Let's talk about that. We can improve nutrient cycling by rotational grazing. Relatively small pastures based on soil type, slope, and aspect. Use your salt feeder to move where the cows are going to bed. Cows are going to bed in shade in hot weather, right? during the day. If you put your mineral feeder out in the middle of the opening, where will they bed at night? Most likely. They're going to be near that mineral feeder. So at least part of the day, even in hot weather, you can get the pee and the poo out away from the shade. Now, if you're at high elevation, West Virginia, you can consider no shade. If you're at low elevation, do not consider no shade, okay? But do consider shade, but have numerous trees in that pasture. Cows will teach you a new idea of rotational grazing and hot weather. I have a shade tree here that I preferably have a whole bunch of shade trees. And I have 3 what I call shade paddocks, that I would try to concentrate my cattle in during hot weather. Okay, I have a tree in the morning. The shadow of the tree's over here, so that's where the cattle are. As the day progresses, the shadow moves and the cattle rotate around the tree. Now the key is you want enough of these trees so that we don't have 30 cows under one tree. What happens if that happens? Pardon me? Speak up so I can hear. I'm getting old and deaf.
They'll trample it down.
They'll trample it down, and they may kill the tree. I've seen that happen. You get too much animal activity under one tree, and that tree, because of all that trampling and salt, you can ultimately kill the tree. That's why you want to, we call this silvopastoral, right? A bunch of trees in that pasture. So in our lower elevation areas, think of that. And sampling and fertilizing. We talk about if you don't know your yield, we do have guidelines on what different soils are expected to produce for you. You can compare your own yield to those published levels to have an index of how you're doing. Under good management, you can do better than many of the published yields, but you need to develop your management skills. Nitrogen fertilizer. We do need nitrogen. The plants do. We do. As well as P and K. There's our orchard grass. To me, this is a very important chart. Now, you might ask, relative yield, why is that important? Okay, N rate. Why is this important? This is the average over the Northeast for all the fertilizer trials that I could find. Didn't matter the soil, didn't matter the year, it didn't matter what soil, year, or foreign species. They all fell within 10% of that line. Okay, where maximum yield is the high end rate in that year. So this line is a mother lode of information relative to nitrogen fertilization. Now, how can I use it? So many people use 50 pounds of nitrogen. Too bad it's usually this triple 19 in the spring. And if you're getting, let's say you're getting a ton and a half of yield at that 50-pound rate, it would say that, okay, if I'm running this system with nitrogen, if I go to 150 pounds of N, I'm going to get I'm going to go from roughly 50 to roughly 75% of my yield potential. So I just went up, 50%, right? By going from here to there. So that's one way you can use that. Now, what am I doing today? And what might I do if I increase my nitrogen fertilization? But then do the math on it. Is it cost effective for your system? But just keep that in mind. I do think this table has value in terms of thinking through your management. I do want to point out that on all of these stands, when we're up in this range, our grasses can produce, up to 6 tons of forage. Okay, if you put 6 tons of dry forage in terms of 33% dry matter silage, how many tons is that? Okay, and let's just take the 18 tons. So, I mean, so many people like to talk about corn silage, okay? They don't talk about how much they lose. Excuse me. If you're on really good quality land, heavy machinery, corn silage works. If you're on these, quote, marginal lands for corn, now these were probably better soil, so these were probably corn silage type land. But look at the lower cost, that you would have from perennial grasses. Now, if we put the same dollar investment into perennial grasses as we do into corn and soybeans. Okay, nitrogen. Legumes fix nitrogen. We can buy nitrogen, urea, ammonium sulfate, or we have organic soil sources. The soil organic matter, livestock manure, and we all have that if we have a livestock farm. That black gold, okay? Think of it that way. You can get poultry litter. You may have poultry on the farm. You can get biosolids. The nice thing in West Virginia, if you do get biosolids, they are regulated, and this is good, because that way you ensure that you don't get too much bad stuff. The other nice thing about West Virginia, most of our small communities that have biosolids actually have very clean biosolids. And what are biosolids? Okay. They're human manure, right? So, excuse me, they're livestock manure, just treated a different way. Excuse me if I'm trying to be funny. You may have seen this already. How much clover do I need? These dots were both red clover and birch foot trefoil. They do as good. One's as good as the other. If the dark blue site, this was a crop rotation site where we've grown corn for it was either 2 or 3 years, and then wheat for a year, and we came back in the fall and no-till seeded. Red clover, birch foot trefoil, and I've forgotten what grass was in there. It was probably either Timothy or orchard grass. And then this would be the following summer, the yields we got off of it. But on this site that was previously cropped, there was no organic matter in the soil. And so there wasn't any nitrogen for the for the grass, sorry. There's no nitrogen from organic matter for the grass. So the legume is doing real well. And if I don't have much legume in there, then the grass is doing really poor. Okay, over on this site, the green site, this was a sod that we killed. Now we killed this in the spring, planted it in the spring, but this is the yield of the following year. You can see that in this sod that has a lot of organic matter, we only needed 20% legume in that site to maintain the nitrogen cycle. So most of our hay fields and pastures are this type of site, high organic matter. That's why we're recommending 20 to 30% legume. Okay, I'm going to let you read that for a minute. I'll take a drink of water. That's the summary of what I just said. High organic, by high organic, I'm talking 10% organic matter, the top 2 inches, versus this other site's going to be down probably about 3% organic matter. Where you need, it's not just need, but that's what you will get.
That's by weight?
Pardon?
Percentage by weight?
The organic matter?
No, the legumes.
Okay, if you're talking Ladina clover, red clover, it could be either white weight or surface cover. We found that just the surface cover, as long as we're talking ladino type white clover and red clover, surface cover is pretty much the same as percent dry rate. So thank you for asking that question. Okay. With good legume management, nitrogen fertilization is not profitable. If you were in the last session, I gave this, but notice here, this is fescue with just ladino clover. We would normally be pushing red clover in a hayfield. I would be pushing red clover with ladino clover in a hayfield, okay? But this was just done with ladino clover. It's a West Virginia soil, even though the research was done in Kentucky. So we share soils. So fescue clover, fescue nitrogen, clover, nitrogen. Okay, year one, got 1,000 pounds more, 700, 500, 500. Average over 4 years, 0.3 tons. If applying the cost of the nitrogen, the cost of application were $72 per acre per year, and that's about what it's going to cost for those two activities, buying it and spreading it. That's $209 per ton of hay, additional hay. Is that cost effective? You wouldn't go out and buy hay other than maybe you buy it for your horse, right? Now, if you're selling hay in small square bales for horses and getting $300 a ton, maybe you want to do it. But for feeding cattle, I don't think so. So there's that's 16% legume in that stand. There's 32% legume. And there's 54% legume. And we took the picture and then we clipped it and hand separated. Legumes do respond to pH. If you have alfalfa, we want a pH of 6.5, and if you don't, you can see alfalfa drops off real quick. The clovers and bird's foot trefoil, they do real well down to a pH of 6. There's our alfalfa, red clover, and I always, red and white clover, if you're going to seed any legume mixture, be it alfalfa or red clover, throw in a pound of good quality ladino clover, because it's a controlled weed. Okay, it runs around the field, be it a hayfield or a pasture, looking for an open spot, and once it finds an open spot, then it will spread out and grow leaves for you. I do like the forks. So manage for the legumes. Harvest height 2 to 3 inches. Rest interval. Under pasture, we can go as low as 3 weeks, as short as 3 weeks. Later in the summer, it's going to be 5 to 6 weeks that we prefer, especially if we have red clover in there. We like the red clover to be an early flower. Slow pH, 6 to 5, depending on the legume. Phosphorus and potassium in the high range. Magnesium and boron. Different ways of seeding legumes: frost, no-till, walk-in, minimum. Bottom line, no fertilizer on spring seedings. Okay? No nitrogen fertilizer on the spring seed. If you have DAP and you're wanting to put phosphorus on, don't worry about the little bit of nitrogen in DAP, but put it on in the fall because it might actually be beneficial in terms of reducing the risk of clover root confusion. That's our major insect pest of clovers. Okay, this is a study done here in the Mid-Atlantic region, orchard grass ladino clover. over a 10-year period of time. They got the best yield at allowing that stand to get to 10 inches and then harvesting down to a 2-inch residual. They only harvested to a 4-inch residual, they only lost 10%. Going from an 8 to 2, they only lost 3%. I'm going to come back to the pasture stick. The pasture stick has a lot of this work into it. Notice if you didn't bring a pasture stick with you, did you? Okay. When you get back in your pasture stick, read the recommends. No. I am pushing that, in cool weather, and when you're trying to stimulate the legume, there is no harm in going to the 2-inch height. Okay? Now, if you're in hot weather, the whole system is under stress. And by hot weather, I'm talking daytime temperatures in the high 80s. Now let's be a little gentler on that stand, and leave 4 inches of stubble, and that's what we're saying here. Hot, dry weather, we're going to be up here at 4 inches. That's going to reduce the stress on the stand as a whole, and if it's in a drought period, it's going to actually prepare that stand for responding more quickly to the rain that you get after the drought. You've got leaf area, you've got green leaf. That green leaf, even in a drought, is making sugars that are going to go into the storage organ. If I have high sugar content in those storage organs, once the rain comes back, it's amazing how much faster that grass will grow. But if you've opened up all your pasture gates and let the cattle graze off all the green leaf, first of all, you've built up the temperature, which in and of itself can suck the energy out of the plant. That plant's still alive. It's not growing. We say it's dormant. It's not really that dormant. It's still going to be respiring energy, which is going to mean it's burning up sugars that are in its storage organs. So there are a lot of reason in that hot, dry weather to leave that 4-inch stuff. But in the cool weather, and especially as you get into cool weather in the fall, that's the reason to get down to that 2-inch. Graze it, then get off. All right? Maybe I don't emphasize that enough. A lot of these things are based on rotational grazing. So we're going to get in, then get off. But that allows the plant to stimulate tiller formation for next year. We don't talk about that enough. So we're going to make that environment good for the legume to get its leaves out. Remember, those legume leaves start right at ground level. But also in the fall, that's the time that the grass is getting signals to develop tiller buds for next year. And if I'm up here in that 4-inch zone, late in the season, I may be reducing, or especially if you mop graze. If you mop graze and get it like that, you get a lot of open ground in and around your plants later on, which is good if you're trying to get rid of tall fescue and get other plants in there. But if you're already in a position where you have orchard grass and clover, that may be bad. Legumes do improve forage quality. If you're not using legume, you need about 50 to 60 units of N per cup. If we have the legume, they're actually, if we're buying nitrogen, we don't want more than 180 to 200 pounds of N. So if you're running the system on nitrogen, no more than round numbers say no more than 200 pounds of N. That's from all sources of N. If you do, you're going to start having major nitrate risks in your local environment. You don't want that. If there is legume in the stand, consider managing for the legume rather than applying nitrogen. The response to nitrogen is going to be low. So this is obviously it's your decision, it's your farm. Which way are you going to go? Run the system with purchased nitrogen or try to run the system with managed legumes? Okay, you're going to have this as a handout. So bear with me, we're not going to even look at it, but I'm going to give it to you. Would you hand that out and I'll talk about this. There are two handouts. The slide I didn't show you. You're taking it home. Then the second handout are just some general guidelines for how do I feed hay bales out on the hay meadow. Now to get good recycling of my nutrients out on the field. And we're almost out of time. If there is time for any questions, I'll give it my best shot. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
There's an evaluation that you should fill out before you take off.
You want to include the birds, what level of percentage or seeding rate?
If I were seeding birds with tree oil,
In with
okay. The question is, if I were seeding birds with tree oil with clover, what rate would I use? There's a challenge there. The two species require different inoculants. So it would be to your advantage to be using pre-inoculated seeds that are coated, just so that each seed is getting its own inoculant. I had to say that up front, okay? Now the seeding rate, to me, Ladino clover, you're wasting seed if you put more than 2 pounds of Ladino clover. I usually say 1 to 2 pounds. The birchwood tree oil, 4 to 8 pounds is what I would recommend. You can always use the lower rate if you have done a good enough job either preparing the seed bed or getting the seed soil contact. So white clover 1 to 2, birchwood tree oil 4 to 8, red clover 4 to 8. Those are my general recommendations. The lower end will do good enough if you do a good job of management. But if you want to just make sure you have a better, thicker stand, then go with the higher rate. There's always the trade-off of seed and money. You like to sell seed. It's more important, thank you. It's more important to buy good seed than it is to use a high seeding rate. Now, I can show you never want to buy common seed. That's almost a waste of money compared to buying good seed. So go in, identify varieties, and we can send you a list of varieties that we would recommend. Or talk to your local seed dealer, see what they recommend. But number one, get good quality seed that you can depend on, and it's to your advantage to buy the quality. Some people go down to the sale barn to buy a bull, and that bull might or might not breed the cows. But you're going to get a better bull if you go to one of our performance sales. Look over at EPDs and performance. Keep in mind the type you want. You may not want that tall, fast-growing bull. You might want that shorter, slower-growing bull that finished earlier. But it's the same with seed. You want to get quality seed, and the quality seed that fits your system. Okay? You can't emphasize that enough. The quality seed.
Other questions for Ed? If you have your West Virginia Nutrient Management license and you didn't get signed in, please do so. This session is worth a couple of CEUs for that, so please do that. Just fill out your evaluation, leave it at the end of the table. I'll pick them up and you can make your way to lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.